Who was that terrifying figure in the black cloak, and why did it disappear as quickly as it arrived? Was it really a demon or something else? Welcome to AI Horror Stories. If you are a fan of horror stories, you have come to the right place. Here, we will introduce you to the most frightening aspects of artificial intelligence. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe to our channel and like the videos. Your support will help us create even more scary stories. The story I am going to tell you is an actual ghost story, not something that was made up. My family has been haunted, and ever since they died, the ghosts still haunt the last house they ever lived in. The time is late 1950, early 1960 in northeast Alabama. My grandparents had 6 children at the time. The house that they were living in was out in the middle of fields of cotton, corn, and hay. They were a simple family with a simple way of life. Pick the fields and get paid. The kids went to school, rode horses, and they were an average family. The haunting started in this house, the greenhouse they called it. Since it was an ugly green color, but then again look at the time setting. Nothing major happened in this house. Just a lot of bumps in the night, but it slowly progressed. Beatings on the windows, doors, and house. So my grandfather liquidated the farm and bought a beautiful 2-story white house not very far from the greenhouse. This is where the haunting got worse. The story of this glorious house was murder. A man shot his wife and stuffed her body into the wall that was in the kitchen. After that, he hung himself in their bedroom. All was quiet and calm in this house, but after some time the woman started playing tricks. My family kept the broom in between the refrigerator and the wall, but every morning the broom would be moved to the wall, where the wife's body was found. After that, the cabinets would all be open, every drawer and every cupboard. 2 of my aunts shared a bedroom, and one night one of them woke up to find a woman at the end of their bed. She was glowing white with long white hair. Her body was clothed in a long white gown. Her face held no emotion. She just stared at them. They threw the covers over themselves and waited a very long time to peek out. When they did, she was gone. There was no more sightings over the years, just the broom and the cabinets went amok every morning. My uncle was a troubled little boy. Now that he is older, they have diagnosed him with a mild schizophrenia and depression. All of my family was out picking cotton in the fields that morning when the White House went up in flames. My uncle had got a hold of a lighter and was playing with it in a closet. He had accidentally set the house on fire. My aunt had just got back from somewhere, and she was able to pull him out of the house in time. It took years of saving money and countless families to help, but my grandparents managed to build a new house. It wasn't as grand as the White House, but it was all they could afford. It was built in the same spot as the White House. Nothing happened at first when they built it, but they couldn't seem to escape the haunting. My aunts don't remember when it first started, but they all clearly remember the beating the house took. Someone would beat on the doors, the windows, and the sides of the house. At this time, my grandfather was in Birmingham working for a logging company, needing money since it was a very dry season, so the cotton wasn't growing. The family was sitting in the living room watching what they could find on the small, ancient TV when they started beating the house. They were making my family very scared, making my grandmother grab the double-barrel shotgun and threatening to shoot them. But when they looked out the door and windows, no one was there. This happened pretty regularly, along with someone beating down their mailbox every time they put up a new one. My grandfather had a police officer come by every night for a long time. He would pull into the long driveway and flash his lights for a while, and then he would leave. Kept whatever was away, but after a while they got back into it. My grandfather took matters into his own hands. He bought a German Shepherd that was trained to attack and kill. This dog was aggressive, but it kept it away since it was tied up in the front yard. But my grandfather got rid of it after some time. On one occasion, he left with a group of his friends to a job somewhere far away for a bit of time. The terrorizing started again. It was a small group of boys who were going to come up to the doors and bang on them. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had a very lazy, but very loyal English bulldog. He slept in a hole next to the porch. And when those boys came up to the door and started banging, he attacked. The family was asleep at the time, so when he started barking and snarling, they threw open the door to watch him chase them into the car, and they took off. Some of these nighttime terrors were caused by teenagers, but most had no living involvement. The teenagers never came around anymore, but the ghosts came every night. It had gotten so bad that all the men in my family and their friends got their hound dogs and shotguns and camped out in the dog houses that were across the drive from the house. The beatings started, and when they shot and let the dogs go, they found no one. It took a long time for the ghosts to stop, but they eventually did. Just a bump in the night was all they encountered. Now here's the next ghost story that involves my family. It was about the same time the beatings stopped. My grandfather had warned my aunts and uncles to stay away from the boogeyman and to not go out anywhere by themselves at night or the day. My hometown's boogeyman was an old, withered man who carried a large burlap sack on his hunched back. My grandfather never said anything about him, just to not go near him if you ever saw him. My Aunt Kick, these are their nicknames that I'm using, was the first to see him. She wasn't sure when she saw him, but what she remembers was seeing him walking along, rather slow, across a field on a late afternoon. The next time she saw him was up close. My Uncle Dag had went horseback riding with a couple of his friends to the local horse club, but one of the family friends came by the house at night telling them that his friends had been drinking and that they needed to go get him. So my grandfather had my aunt, Phyllis, Dude, and Kick pile up into the truck and go get him. The drive to the club was a ways away, so they took off slowly, searching the roads, hoping to find him, since he knew better than to ride with drunk people. Well on the drive, their lights got a glimpse of an old man, walking along the road carrying a large burlap sack on his back. They slowly drove by him. My aunts stared at his downcast face, but after they got past him they took off. They found my uncle riding down the road towards them. Shouting at him to get in, he tied his horse to the back and they locked the doors. Phyllis slowly drove down the road, since the horse was tied to the back, but they all feared seeing the boogeyman, but they didn't see him on their way back, and after that they never saw him again. Fast forward a couple years later, my Aunt Kick was on her way to work on a very cold winter morning. Keep in mind this was a demon sighting. She was using her mom's car since hers wouldn't start, but this one wasn't much better. The engine and gas were literally frozen. She had made it up the road a good piece when steam started coming out. The car slowly crept along the road. The fields were bare of life since it was winter. This road was very disturbing. On the right you had a field used to grow corn, but the field had a big hill that was impossible to see around. On the left you had very thick, dark woods that were very scary to look at, especially when the trees were dead. But in the deserted field my aunt saw a figure. A tall, dark, moving man, or so she hoped. It was wearing a long black cloak, with the hood pulled up and over its face. It was gliding along the field towards my aunt. She thought it was the angel of death coming for her. She prayed and prayed for the car to go, to at least make it the end of the road where our neighbor's house was. And God was on her side that morning. The car made it to the house, and as my aunt turned back, she watched the demon disappear over the hill. No one saw that figure ever again. Fast forward to when my mom was a little girl. She woke up one night to the sound of heavy footsteps walking down the long hallway of the house. It was her, my grandparents, and her two brothers that lived there, but she was positive she saw her dad go back to their room and go to sleep that evening before she went to bed. So feeling brave, she ran into the hall and turned the light on. All the doors were closed, and when she called out, no one answered. This was the last ghost appearance for a very long time. I'm fixing to be 16, and I have lived in this house at one point and nothing happened. It has been over 8 years since my grandparents died. The house was renovated and is now being rented out. And my aunt told me some time ago that the family was experiencing phenomenons. Whenever they would come home, things would be moved around their house. Furniture, pictures, and knickknacks. My aunt hasn't heard anything new from the family, but I hope they don't have to go through what my family had to. This is my family's ghost story. I'm sorry it's poorly written, but everything in it is true.